Lotha, and greetings to all of you on this International Day of Peace. This time last week, a number of the presidents of the IUP, led by the association's own president, Fernando Leon Garcia, and some non-presidents, fortunate non-presidents like myself, were in Osaka, Japan for our semi-annual meeting. And it was the last full week before what we call the autumn equinox, and of course, the day celebrated as the International Day of Peace. A very apposite meeting point, because the one landmark event each year at the United Nations, as Ambassador Kim will recall, on the 21st of September, is a ceremony in what we call the Japanese Peace Garden, a rose garden just outside the Secretariat building, where there is a peace bell, which was actually literally coined out of small donations given by children around the world. And those coins were melted into the giant bell that, even as we speak, is being sounded by the Secretary General and the Ambassador of Japan. So it's a particularly apposite day for half our panel, those who are in Brazil and South Africa and New Zealand. It's looking forward to a season of longer days, more sunlight. And for others in our panel from in Mexico, in Spain, and in the United States, it's looking ahead to shorter days, yes, but also more convivial evenings with family, with friends, with conversation, and certainly with cuisine. And so it's in many ways a best of both worlds that we usher in on what was very thoughtfully designated as the International Day of Peace. So to launch our conversation on this day and look ahead to the future, we have IUP's president, Fernando Leon Garcia. Fernando?
Thank you, Ramon. As usual, very eloquent, very inspiring in your thoughts and words. Thank you. So glad to have you all here, distinguished friends. Thank you for joining us for the annual commemoration of the International Day of Peace. I know this is not, as we said, the most convenient hour of the day for many of you, and particularly grateful for the effort you have made to be with us. The International Association of University Presidents is proud to be the originator of this day. It was at our conference in San Jose, Costa Rica in 1981 that the idea of the day was first proposed and adopted. Credit for that goes to Young-Sik Cho, then president of Kyung-Hee University in Korea. We are delighted that our conversation today will be led by Ambassador Wong-Soo Kim, rector of the Academy of Future Civilizations at Kyung-Hee. This year's observance of the day occurs on the 17th anniversary of the assumption of office by the first woman to be elected president of the United Nations General Assembly. Vijay Lakshmi Pandit was the first, and there have only been 4 other women in 78 years of United Nations history. What is true of global diplomacy is true of academic institutions as well. At our semi-annual meeting in the serene and lovely city of Osaka last week, we heard a select group of women leaders speak of the hardships they had to navigate, stereotypes they had to surpass, prejudices they had to overcome, just to be what they had every right to be. It is for this reason that I have asked 2 of our most valued members, Chancellor Beth Strovoff, and not with us here today also, President Deborah Lieberman, to lead an association-wide effort to challenge the many limitations women have in the international higher education landscape. Indeed, in the national and regional as well. As Ramu, and perhaps some of you, Ambassador Kim maybe, might recall, 20 years ago, in 2003, in Monterrey, Mexico, IUP's women president, Ingrid Moses from Australia, University of New England, I recall, organized a conference together with the International Association of University Females Secretary General on women and leadership in higher education. How thick is the glass ceiling? That was the topic. Today, many years later, standing before you at SETIs, and on the theme, with still many of the same challenges from then, we carry forward the flag first flown 20 years ago and pledge our association to develop and to nurture one of the surest guarantors for a caring peace, the leadership and rightful place of women. As we look to the future, in the phrase of our conversation theme today, that flag must fly strong and high. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for that way forward and the flag that you have unfurled and which flies proudly today. It's now my privilege to invite Ambassador Kim Won-soo. Among his many accomplishments at the United Nations is that of being one of the architects of the entity we know today as UN Women, which really gave a face, if you will, under Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to organization-wide efforts to further the progress, the association, and the involvement of women in the global landscape. Ambassador Kim has also served in a number of capacities directly related to the question of peace, most recently as the Undersecretary General and High Representative on issues of disarmament at the United Nations. Ambassador Kim.
Thank you, Ramu Damodaran of the University of Peace. Thank you for your very, I think, almost flattering introduction of me. And also I thank Dr. Fernando Leon Garcia, President of the International Association of University Presidents. It is my distinct pleasure to speak on the occasion of 2023 International Day of Peace. And also, I'd like to extend my heartfelt congratulations to IAUP. As President Garcia said, it was indeed based on the suggestion of the founder of Kyunghee University, Dr. Jo Young-sik, where I currently serve as the Director of Global Academy for Future Civilization in 1981. Back then, Korea was not even a member of the United Nations. So Dr. Jo didn't have any means to present the resolution to the United Nations. So he asked IAUP, and IAUP adopt the resolution at the meeting in Costa Rica, and then asked Costa Rica to submit the resolution to the General Assembly, and General Assembly adopted the resolution by unanimity. And it reaffirms that a peace must be based on the solidarity of all the peoples of the world, rising above the national governments. Otherwise, peace will not be sustained. So since then, the International Day of Peace is observed as a prelude to the annual UN Summit in September. As Ramu just said, every high-level segment of the United Nations started with the bell ring at the garden of the International Day of Peace. And I would argue the International Day of Peace also contributed to the easing of tensions and the eventual demise of the Cold War. This is not just my argument, but former General Secretary Gorbachev said it when he visited Gyeonggi in 1994. Without International Day of Peace, it would be much harder to see the end of the Cold War. And this year's theme for the International Day of Peace is Actions for Peace, our ambition for the global goals. It is a call to action that recognizes our individual and collective responsibility to foster peace, because fostering peace can contribute to the realization of sustainable development goals. And achieving SDGs can then create a culture of peace for all. As often said in the UN corridor, without peace, development cannot be achieved. But without development, peace cannot be sustained. This year's International Day of Peace launches a year of reflection and anticipation, which will culminate with the UN Summit of the Future, September next year. This summit is described as a maybe historic opportunity to enhance cooperation on critical challenges the whole humanity is facing and reinvigorate multilateralism. Indeed, this task is formidable and much easier said than done. It cannot be done without a clear vision for a future civilization that is equitable, humane, and sustainable. Humanity stands at a crossroads of peace or collapse. And this is the theme. Actually, earlier today, Gyeonggi University observed International Day of Peace by its the Peace Bar, BAR festival we are holding every year. And the theme of the Peace Bar Festival was Peace or Collapse, Planetary Society at an Inflection Point. Because we are now facing a perfect storm of existential threats. The specter of nuclear winter is returning. Climate disasters are getting worse and worse. Global governance is failing when it is needed the most. This is unprecedented in the history, not only human history, but the history of planet Earth, as these crises are not natural, but human-induced. Over the last 10,000 years, human civilization's accomplishments are good, but it comes at an increasingly unbearable cost to Earth's ecosystem and human society. Now, we are afraid. We may be right upon the point of no return. Or worse, we may have already crossed it. Unfortunately, the days ahead of us do not look good. Things are likely to get only worse from here. The climate crisis is real, yet it's only the tip of the iceberg. The bulk of the iceberg hidden underwater is the excess of human civilization, particularly industrial civilization. So what we are witnessing now is in fact a crisis of civilization. However, our response has been profoundly lacking. We as humanity have yet to take the necessary collective action to get off the path we are on. Unless we change the current paradigm of industrial civilization, we cannot solve this problem. Time is running out. As Secretary General Guterres said, we are inching toward collective suicide. We do not have Plan B because we do not have a Planet B. We only have one Earth. Keeping our planet safe and healthy requires all government, civil society, and private sector leaders to work together. Global leadership is in deep deficit, and global governance is in great turmoil. Big powers, they are not interested in cooperation. They are more intent on competition and confrontation rather than cooperation. UN Security Council's inability to produce any outcome, particularly following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, is a prime example of this decline in global governance. Global governance must be restored. Multilateralism must be renewed. For that, I count on the leadership of academic and other private sector leaders gathered today. Academia has a special role to play in raising awareness among the public and encouraging innovative thinking to correct the excessive and unsustainable paths we are on. We have to groom a new set of leaders to address the demands of a great transformation. Higher education and civil society must change. I would like to salute the great efforts IAUP has put into promoting SDGs and a culture of peace in academia and the public. This is highly commendable. We, the peoples of the world, must be reminded of our responsibility to fundamentally transform our ways of thinking, acting, and living. Peace Bar Festival Gyeonggi, hosted today, means BAR stands for spiritually beautiful, materially affluent, and humanly rewarding. BAR. The festival's theme, as I said, peace or collapse, planetary society at an inflection point. It was also very much in line with this year's theme of the International Day of Peace, which are actions for peace. The first step toward achieving these goals should be to recognize that humanity is a tiny part, very small part of the nearly infinite universe, filled with countless possibilities of cosmic evolution. Humanity will inevitably face even bigger questions about the universe as our scientific and technological advancements continue. The vastness of the universe and planet Earth and human society within it, along with climate change, AI, nuclear threats, and even unidentified anomalous phenomenon, UAP, formerly called UFO, compel us to profoundly reflect on the consciousness and politics that have driven human history. I hope this reflection leads to a fundamentally new and truly sustainable paradigm of human civilization. This must be our new peace agenda. The journey ahead of us will be bumpy and arduous. However, divided, we cannot make it. Together, we have some hope. Our future is still in our hands, and it will be determined by the choices we make now. We must make the right choices. We must keep our planet safe and secure for all generations, not only present, but also future. We must renew our peace agenda. For that, I count on IAUP to lead the way again, as you did 42 years ago. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you for that very pertinent exhortation to live, to think, and to act. And I would also like to express our gratitude to you for your association in the numerous meetings that Secretary General Ban Ki-moon had with the then president of IUP, Michael Adams, which led to the fashioning of what has now become one of the largest movements of minds in the world, the United Nations Academic Impact. I'm very grateful, and I think back also President Jo Young-sik, who thought of the idea not of utopia, but of autopia, what ought to be, what the world ought to be, what people ought to be, much of which you have represented in your talk this morning, and which really sets us an agenda forward as we move, as you mentioned, to the summit of the future. A future in which two elements, again, which you refer to, will be critical: technology and creativity. And to reflect upon those is a scholar and a thinker who has worked extensively in both areas, Amy Malcolm of the Auckland University of Technology, to whom I now give the floor at 2 a.m. your time. Thank you, Amy.
Kia ora koutou. Hello to everyone from Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's an honour to be joining you today on behalf of AUT, the Auckland University of Technology, and I thank Ramu for the wonderful way he continues to connect people from around the globe, bringing us together to share views, create understanding, and collectively plan for peace and harmony for all on our planet. I've been asked to speak about how creativity at the individual and community level can further the cause of peace. And of course, I believe that it can. And I want to focus on a few of the ways that I think, as we look forward to a more turbulent future, creativity is fundamental in our journey toward peace. I want to share how creativity is a tool for deepening the way we communicate and understand each other, enabling deep and difficult conversations. How creativity has enabled us to share cultural understanding and build positive connections between cultures, and how creativity helps us to heal, rebuild, and reimagine our lives for a better future. And I propose that the more we do these things, the closer we will get towards peace. There are various definitions of creativity, but to share mine, I see creativity as coming up with a new or novel idea that has value, either to yourself or to someone else. I believe all humans are born creative and that you can learn to be more creative. Amongst us, there are highly creative people and highly creative people that create significant value to others. But creativity is for everyone, and it's the everyday creativity that has the power to move us towards peace. And finally, when we're talking about creativity, I believe that while you can find it in a wide range of disciplines, the arts in all of their forms are especially important for enabling the expression of creativity and as a source of creative energy. I've said that creativity is a tool for deepening the way we communicate and understand each other. There was creativity before language, marks made on cave walls to tell stories, for example. And there are times that we can't find the language to express the way we feel. But a dance can tell a story in a way words cannot. Music can move us and make us feel emotions that would take so much longer to achieve with language alone. And as we all know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. My 90-year-old friend tells me about when he travelled in countries where he didn't speak the language, he would take his pens and sketchbook. And when he found an artist on a sidewalk or in a cafe, he would sit beside them and make marks in his sketchbook, then pass the sketchbook to the other artist, and they would to and fro in conversation without words. Words, of course, are also used creatively. Novels that tell us stories about what it was like in war, how growing up in a different land with different cultures affect the way you think and feel. Poetry that stops us and makes us interpret its meaning. And of course, quotes that assemble people to lead them on a mission, either towards or away from peace. And the performing arts have the power to take us to faraway places, to see the world differently, to walk in other people's shoes. The world is full of art galleries, and there, of course, is much to learn about how people lived in different times and what is important in different cultures. But I believe we don't yet see enough of the power of an art gallery in promoting peace. Imagine an art gallery as a gymnasium of the mind, a curation of images that start courageous conversations about difficult concepts, a space for people to gather around the artworks and think and imagine how life is different for others, to draw and make art in response to what they see, what they hear from others and how they respond. Imagine the possibilities of an art gallery as a gymnasium of the mind to transform thinking, to enhance understanding, and to guide us towards peace. I said that creativity enables us to share cultural understanding and build positive connections between cultures. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, we are engaging in courageous and difficult conversations with our Indigenous people, the first people of the land, Māori. New Zealanders are in varying stages in their journey of accepting that the treaty signed in 1840 between the British colonists and Māori was interpreted differently between the two cultures, and that the British used their power and resources to advance their understanding of the partnership. This has led to significantly worse economic, social, and health outcomes for Māori. This story is not unique. Poor outcomes for Indigenous people can be seen in many colonised countries. But New Zealand is generally considered to be doing well compared to many other countries in terms of its race relations. I believe the arts have a role to play here. When Pākehā, white New Zealanders, can be heard complaining about Māori, they also, along with Pacific people, Asian and other New Zealanders, are very proud when the All Blacks perform a haka, a Māori ceremonial war dance at the beginning of a rugby game. And there was great disappointment in New Zealand a few weeks ago when in Australia, a Māori with a tattoo on his chin was not allowed into a bar. We are learning in New Zealand to appreciate the meaning and the significance of the moku, the Māori tattoo design. We sing the Māori and the English versions of the national anthem. Our sports team wear the native silver fern on their sports uniforms, and our favourite New Zealand songs are being translated into te reo, the Māori language. Song, dance, storytelling, design, fashion, creativity and the arts are helping to bring our nation closer together despite our differences. They help to build a culture and a shared identity and give us an advantage as we try to find peaceful ways of living together in a revised understanding of our partnership. We see many countries using the arts as soft diplomacy, as a way to influence the behaviour and thinking of others through the exchange of ideas, to invite others to understand the beauty and richness of their culture. Using the arts to build an appreciation and understanding of other cultures has been a successful strategy for a very long time, and it continues to be, most recently on social media channels. And finally, I proposed that creativity helps us to heal, rebuild, and reimagine our lives. When community theatre companies like Shakespeare Behind Bars take prisoners, go into prisons and work with the incarcerated, they're giving the prisoners an opportunity to reimagine their lives, spending hours playing another character, deeply imagining what it is like to live in someone else's shoes, speaking with another person's words, engaging in another character's relationships, provides a prisoner with an opportunity to rethink the possibilities for their own future and life. How might they behave differently? And how might that lead to a more peaceful existence for them, their family and community? When clowns visit a hospital ward to bring laughter and magic to a sick child, or when Radio Lollipop provides music and play to children's hospital wards, or when a violinist plays music in a war zone to provide a moment of beauty and calm, creativity can heal. In some of the projects I've seen, theatre makers have worked with the homeless in Auckland and LA to share their stories, restore their dignity, and develop their pride. And after an earthquake has devastated a community, they have gone into the schools to help the children and the teachers resettle into learning. How can you learn when members of your family have died and you don't feel safe? And how can you teach when you feel the same? Creatives have used the arts to help the children to tell their stories, to play games where they can express their feelings and start to imagine a safer future, where they can grieve and rebuild relationships so they can start to learn again. So creativity at both an individual and community level is a force for good and can move us towards peace. In addition to enhancing understanding, allowing deeper communication and sharing of ideas, and helping us to heal and reimagine our lives, creativity is fun. It's good for our well-being, and it's vital as we search for new solutions to the increasing problems faced by humanity. And luckily, we are all creative. I hope that everyone recognises that and works to explore and grow their own creativity for their own satisfaction, for the benefit of their communities, and to help us all on a journey toward a more peaceful world. Ngā mihi nui, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. And looking at downtown Manhattan at the United Nations just a couple of miles away, I think that idea that you had about the need to heal, to rebuild, to reimagine is one that should inform the current high-level debate of the General Assembly, which is on. And I'm also very grateful for your reference to the arts as the gymnasium of the mind. And one of the greatest choreographers in that gymnasium is our next speaker, Dr. Lanitra Berger, who is, of course, the president of NAFSA, but beside that, a distinguished art historian and a writer of arts in her own right. Lanitra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ramu. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to Fernando for leading this wonderful panel. And I also want to just give a special recognition to Dr. Thomas Morales, who is on your executive committee and is the president of Cal State University, San Bernardino. I was born and raised in San Bernardino, California, and Cal State University was the first time I got to visit a university library and understand the power of higher education. So I'm very grateful to all of you for being here today. I want to talk to you about an example of what I think embodies social justice, international education, creativity, and peace building. And then I'll just make a few comments in response to that. In 2020, I edited a book called Social Justice and International Education, in which I was given the opportunity to discuss an example that I thought embodied those two concepts. And I decided to center the role that historically Black college universities played in sponsoring and hiring German Jewish refugee scholars in the 1930s and 40s. This is a chapter of higher education history and American history that is not very well known. But in the 1930s, as German Jewish scholars were under attack and anti-Semitism was on the rise, many of those scholars applied to come to universities in the United States to seek refuge. Many of them applied to Ivy League institutions and were rejected and denied entry. Yet, our nation's historically Black colleges and universities saw an opportunity. They saw an opportunity to provide refuge to scholars who are in danger, but they also recognized the immense talent that these scholars had and saw a need that they could fill in their own curricula. These institutions were charged with educating the sons and daughters of American slaves, but were given virtually no funding to do that. And so these institutions gave German Jewish refugee scholars visas to come and teach at historically Black colleges and universities. The result was completely unpredictable. When the scholars arrived, they were grateful for the opportunity. They were excited to get back in the classroom and start doing their research again. But because most of these institutions were located in the American South, they also observed the brutality of Jim Crow racism. They saw the segregation, they saw the racial violence, and it looked all too familiar to what they had just fled in Nazi Germany. So rather than keep quiet and say, you know what, I'm safe, I'm just gonna put my head down, they encouraged students to speak out and to speak up against the injustice and resist Jim Crow laws. So what ended up happening was this wonderful collaboration in which These German Jewish refugee scholars came to the United States. They shared their talents, they shared their expertise with students, but they also encouraged them not to accept the status quo and to stand up for what they believed in. Ultimately, the scholars came from all different fields. They came from physics and the arts and humanities and the social sciences, and they were at institutions throughout the South. So many of the Black professionals of today can trace their educations back to some of these scholars. So they've left this very long-term legacy that, again, as I said, not very many people understood or know about. What's so impactful to me about that work is not only does it show how institutions can work to support refugee students and scholars, but these were decisions that occurred at the presidential level. These were executive decisions. And so the presidents looked and they had to make quick decisions and say, you know, this is what we can do to support these scholars who are facing imminent danger, but we can also help our students in this process. And so this decision-making process has these long-term implications that we're still seeing today, the legacy of these refugee scholars on our campuses and in our communities. So I love to share that example because, as I said, not very many people are aware of this rich history, but it also, to me, really points to the power that university presidents have on their campuses, the influence that they have in their communities. So not every example is that dramatic, but I believe that international education should be democratized. It's not a training ground for the elite. It's not a place that's a finishing school for people to go and enter the upper echelons of government and to be isolated. International education is a grassroots venture. It's a place where we train people to be awake and aware of all of the injustices that are going on in their communities, both on their university campuses, in their broader communities, and in the world. There's really such a symbiotic relationship between training students to look at the global and training them to look at the local. When students are much more attuned to the world immediately surrounding their communities, they are also much more attuned to what they see going on in the world around them. The process of building these learning communities through international education fosters academic humility and intellectual curiosity through immersion in other cultures. And this is how we can create genuine and authentic human relationships and understanding. The exchange of students and scholars uses academic institutions to bring people together around shared values of learning, asking questions, and most importantly right now, engaging across difference. Too many times we see that students, scholars, our people in our community are siloed. They only watch, consume media that confirms their own point of view. And I think that this is what's really contributing to what Ambassador Kim was saying about the collapse of global governance. If we live in these silos and these echo chambers and we don't get a chance to get to know people as human beings, even when we disagree, it is very difficult for us to come together and address shared problems. And universities are the crucibles of that type of activity. That's usually the time when students have come to a community that's the first, that's outside of their own, where they are starting to understand who they are independently of the place in which they were raised and the parents who gave them life. And it's a very special and unique opportunity for us to help students understand that process of connecting across difference. One of my first professional jobs in the nonprofit world was working for a trade association of historically Black college and university presidents, and it's called NAFIO, the National Association for Equal Opportunity in Higher Education. That was an extraordinary opportunity for me as a young professional to begin dialoguing and learning from college presidents at a very young age. And that opportunity helped me to see the incredible power that college presidents have on their campuses, but in communities of practice like the one that we're together with today. Many institutions that I was working with at NAFIO faced tremendous challenges in terms of their funding, in terms of building relationships with their communities, in terms of curriculum and faculty. yet their commitment to student success clearly came from the top. And I noticed in my role in helping to build campus internationalization plans for HBCUs that institutions where internationalization was a commitment from the very top, they typically had much more international engagement on campus. And I think that's an important lesson for anyone who's leading a college campus right now. If you're able to publicly declare and support your commitment to campus internationalization through supporting the international educators on your campus, to take a visit to their office, send a tweet, give them a shout out, anything to show that you understand and value their work. Those are the people who are on the ground every day working to build those connections between students, between scholars, between the university community and the local community. And that's really through that people-to-people exchange is where we start to see relationships build, people's ideas change, and people's commitment to a more socially just and peaceful world come from there. So I'm so grateful that you're doing this today to celebrate Peace Day, and I really appreciate this opportunity. And thank you so much for the chance to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lenitra, and thank you for that reference to academic humility and intellectual curiosity, the idea of internationalization as a grassroots movement, and the refusal, as you put it so eloquently, to accept the status quo. And indeed, the next meeting or the annual meeting of NAFSA is going to be in a city that refused to accept the status quo and is a cauldron, if you will, of creativity, New Orleans. So all the very best for that. In our own lifetimes, you mentioned, Lenitra, of course, the history of the German Jews, but in our immediate lifetimes, the one compelling instance of an entire people refusing to accept the status quo is the people of South Africa towards the end of the last century and the beginning of the present one. And it's my privilege to invite an old and cherished friend, Dr. Levan Samuels, who is not only a distinguished dental surgeon and a professor at the Durban University of Technology, but also the second-time president of the International Education Association of South Africa. Levan?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ramo, for this kind invitation and for allowing me to represent my university, Durban University of Technology, and the International Education Association of South Africa. I want to take off where Lenitra left off on international education and relate it to some of the geopolitical shifts that we have seen in the world. We live in a world that has seen tremendous geopolitical shifts rather recently. We also are on the other side of a global pandemic that I would describe as epoch-defining. We've come out of it in a world that is very different from the world that existed before this huge change. So where does that leave universities and international education? Well, for me, what it says is that never before have universities had such an important role in shaping a global commons of scholars, scholarship, and engagement. We need universities to take this lead role, and it's a rather unique role because it's a role that sometimes governments do not address adequately. Universities need to be those bridges in society that bring different societies together and communicate in a people-to-people manner that is simply not happening at a government-to-government level. We need to look at the different challenges that higher education can get involved in. And of course, the grand challenges that are embedded in the United Nations SDGs and Africa Agenda 2063 come to mind. We look at climate change, for example, and like the ambassador said, there is no plan B. We have just one planet. But equally, we have other challenges like human rights violations that are as compelling for us to address in higher education. We come together in a rather fragmented world. And in that fragmented world, I believe that international education has an important role. But international education has not always been inclusive. It has, in fact, for many years been elitist, exclusive, and elusive to many. So let me give you some figures on how this works. Europe has had the best funded academic mobility program called Erasmus over a number of years, and actually it's been billions of euros that have been spent. The maximum, the optimal participation in this program has been 20%. And since COVID, that number has dropped significantly. The biggest economy in the world, the US, at its highest, participation in international mobility has been 7 to 9%. It's now under 5%. That figure drops to 1% and under 1% in a continent like Africa. So when we talk about inclusive, comprehensive internationalization, it is actually a commitment to the other 99%. And at Durban University of Technology, we have taken this very seriously, moving from a brand of internationalization that was exclusive, elitist, and elusive to one that is inclusive and inviting and embracing. So we speak about the impact of internationalization being in the core business of the university. And that is, in fact, where it belongs. It needs to impact on research. It needs to impact on teaching and learning. It needs to impact on the engagement with universities. But it should never end there, because internationalization of higher education, when all the credits and all the mobilities and all the engagement is counted, is actually a contribution to the broader human project. It's about the ability, the transformative potential of internationalization, not just for the individual, but at a collective and systemic level, changing the university, changing society around the university, and then looking beyond. It is why we look at the shaping of local citizens, students and staff members who not only understand the local context and the national and regional context, but also the global context, and more importantly, the bridge that brings these contexts together. The pandemic that we've just lived through has actually demonstrated the inextricable link between the local and the global in ways that we have never seen before. And so in the type of internationalization that we embed, we should actually be shaping these global citizens. But let me take that to another level. And we've heard the word leadership mentioned a number of times today. Never before have we had the dearth of leadership that we have in the world today. Political leadership, economic leadership, and we see some of the big democracies in the world struggling with leadership in ways that we would not have envisaged some years ago. So what is the role of the university and of international education? I believe that international education should be driving the creation of a pool and a generation of new leaders. And yes, we do need leaders like Mandela and Tutu and Gandhi that have had huge impact across the world. But equally, we need leaders at all levels and spheres of society that can make a difference in the local context, in the regional context, and on the global context. International education has that capacity. Now, international education has been rather narrow in the way it was implemented in the past, but we need a brand of internationalization that is inclusive and comprehensive, that also addresses issues like social justice. We need epistemic justice to be looked at, because knowledges are not valued in the way that they should. We still have dominant paradigms, which is why decolonization of the curriculum is so important. And one may, look at decolonization and say it's a rather insular approach, but it isn't. It actually calls for deeper and broader internationalization, bringing new voices to the table, giving a voice to those that are at the table but don't feel empowered to have that voice. And I think if internationalization can address some of these issues, the diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, I think it can be hugely impactful. The role of internationalization in shaping higher education, I think, has reached a point now where no university can function without a strategy. And we heard Lenitra talk about the role of the president of a university. Internationalization that is not embedded in strategy actually is bound to fail, because it becomes the efforts of a few across a university without the coalescence and the impact that internationalization can have. We also need internationalization to look at issues such as North-South relations and how we can actually engage with that in meaningful ways, how we can address the SDGs and Africa Agenda 2063 in a cohesive and a comprehensive way. I think international education has a fundamental role to play in shaping the new society that we look to lead the world. So I want to leave you with a few African proverbs that I often use. And one of them is looking to the future and shaping that future. And a group like today's group actually does exactly that. And the first one is, the wise woman plants a tree that she will never sit under. And it is our role to leave that legacy to the next generation, to help them, to give them a lead, to give them lead time to shape a better world. The second one that I want to share with you is the need for collaboration, the need for us to work together, because if we don't, individual efforts actually become fairly meaningless if there is no impact for them. And that goes like this: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So today is really an invitation for us to walk together so that we can go further together. And the last one that I want to leave you with is one that talks about decolonization of the curriculum, that talks about the need for redress, epistemic justice, valuing knowledges, and for us to actually be at the center of that. And this proverb goes like this: for as long as the lion does not have a storyteller, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And we need to be those storytellers that reshape the narrative for a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laverne. And when you began, I was reminded of the phrase that Secretary General Ban Ki-moon used when launching the Academic Impact. He said very simply, governments cannot do it alone. And you have brought that to the forefront, the idea of scholarship, of global scholarship, as well as local scholarship in that cause. And the fact that so many of the principles of the United Nations, decolonization, human dignity and equality, which were done at a global level, have had their own impact upon higher education, particularly through associations like your own. And certainly that last proverb that you quoted, the vitality, if you will, of multilateralism in a world where unilateralism tends to be overpowering and overshadowing, is again a lesson that education can teach politics. So thank you for that. We have another speaker now from the medical profession, who is by profession a nurse and also a researcher in the field of public health, Doctora Ivanilda Souza G. Santana Carvalho from the Universidade Estadual in Brazil. The floor, madam, please.
Thank you so much. And good morning for me at Brazil. I want to say first thank you. Muito obrigado for this invitation. and Mr. Fernando Leon, Mr. Muda Damoran. Especially thank you for your generosity for inviting me to talk today with these more competent, influent panelists. The part that I will speak now about my perspective, in my perspective is the one contest, sorry, the nursing school and the nursing professional. When we talk about peace, we think in caring all people indistinctly, the race, sex, religion, or culture. About it, I want to say that we take the position that is imperative to educate professionals in all levels, from the undergraduate to doctoral and the postdoctoral levels, about a global perspective in health in the welfare environments. In general, the faculties develop a program to create opportunities for students to learn about many processes and invasive actions for healing the body, the physical body. But it's necessary to develop competence and engagement to fight against injustices, prevent and adopt coping strategy facing the crisis that affect the more vulnerable people. We believe that is necessary to emphasize a peaceful approach and therefore must include teaching about trajectory of violence, include domestic violence, racism, xenophobia, LGBTQI+, neglect, abuse, crimes, war, terrorism, with the goal of prevent such violence. These are serious public health problems that directly affect the health of individuals and the population, not only physical body, but mental, spiritual bodies, in physical, psychological, and dimensions of human people. Discussing the leadership role in promoting health, address the ill effects, not only the ill, but the crisis, the war, and the violence environment. Inequalities, disparities in health produce more violence produce less peace. In the environment that inequalities is imperative, and the people suffering and lack the basic necessities is not attended, is one good environment to grow violence and the peace is low. In this situation, the strong case for our responsibility to become involved in conflict resolutions in all levels, include the local, community, national, and international levels. But many schools is more dedicated yet in the local level. For understand the peace in the globe is necessary the internalization, the high schools and the higher education and the leadership education too, because we need leaders that can understand not only local community, but national community and the international community too. The academic education needs to develop learning experience for building technology for our peace culture. manage conflicts, recognize negative feelings, and sensitively produce sensitive listening, the suffering narratives, support people to find their own solutions or the day solutions. Sorry, because my English is not the best yet. For example, the nurses occupy a leadership position in diverse kinds of institutions and contexts. Because I defend that nurses can be a facilitator to restorative cycle, encourage individuals and the families to recognize the responsibility in their actions and produce the peace. Because all actions produce consequences, the positive or negative consequences. Those involved learn to help each other and consequently to help all the people, including those who are not part of the circle, the conflict, the crisis, such as friends, distant family members, colleagues at work, through the ideas and solutions for generate one group in order to find positive alternatives for everyone's lives. The nurse can be the conflict mediator in families and the workers and the whole community, taking into account characteristics such as impartiality, independence, and the participatory action that those involved. Furthermore, the mediator must remain alert, avoid judgments in the arbitrary stances, seek to understand the nature of conflicts, and maintain confidentiality of information given during mediation the conflicts. At this moment, it's estimated that more million refugees and the 22 million displaced persons in the globe. That's producing more disturbances and affect more conflicts in civilians in the different parts of the world. What's, in my opinion, we need embrace the challenge together that focus the care in the human, in the people, in the persons, in the communities, and reduce the focus, the humanity, in the economics and the lucrative process. It's like the capital and the capitalism producing more inequalities necessary for us find solutions and toward a peace way. It's necessary talk about structural problems produced by capitalism. And the conflict in different parts amplify the suffering and poverty, and only adds the humanity in misery, problematics and consequences that is more difficult to solve. With the destructions of homes and civilian infrastructure, hundreds of thousands of people are now living under conditions deprived of the most basic necessities of human life. Inadequate sanitation, lack of access to potable drinking water, food and shelter, and pollution are, as a result, the several environmental pollution that is necessary we talk about, and environment crisis too. We produce many people without mothers, without families. Many orphans around the world will go without network for giving care for this population. Our children living under conditions, the basic conditions is necessary to think about it, because it's impossible, in my opinion, produce one peace when we have many children without caring. Many people private their liberty, their freedom. Many people live without the basic conditions. Could be more dangerous for One Piece way. When and how I am a nursing, my perspective is about caring. I believe that nurses know firsthand how pandemics, epidemics, and the conflicts produce in the health of people. And it's necessary we prevent catastrophic consequences and advance the cause of peace. Less well understood are the emotional, psychological, and mental health effects of a crisis like epidemics, war, and unstable environments that can be a devastation, like a physical effect. For example, produce symptoms like depression, anxiety, poor suicide, and the difficult to family adaptation and the coping. The nurse can collaborate like the leadership position with the other health professionals and the social professionals in the public to protect human rights, advocate for promoting health diplomacy, reduce health disparities, and the call to collaborate in order achieve and sustain health as a means to the common goods, or that individuals in the communities worldwide can develop the full its potential and live with dignity. And it's necessary look today what we have in potential to produce one better future for our children and our communities around the globe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Carvalho. And thank you for reminding us that, as I mentioned, one of the oldest and noblest professions of the world, that of nursing, was intended to take care of the illnesses and the ailments we have as human beings, and not those whom we as human beings inflict upon other human beings, as in the case of war, and even in the case of unmindful natural disaster. So thank you for all that you're doing, including your academic leadership. It's now my privilege to invite a cherished friend, Dr. Inigo Arbel Oñate, who, apart from being a professor of international relations and business diplomacy, is also leading the first effort in the world to localize the Sustainable Development Goals in an academic and civic setting in the city of Bilbao, in the Basque country of Spain. Inigo?
Yes, Arratsaldeon. Good afternoon. Buenas tardes a todos. Thank you very much for the invitation to the International Association of University Presidents, to Dr. Leon Garcia, Ambassador Damodaran Diaramu, colleagues, panelists, right? So thank you for the invitation to this virtual panel, precisely in this very vibrant but also complex moment for international relations, right? For sustainable development, for peace, right? And the three of them as part, understood as part of a single thing, right? In this complex scenario I was mentioning in Bilbao, in Basque Country, in Spain, we are waiting, as Ramos said, with enormous expectation, the opening of in the following months, hopefully by October, the Secretariat of the Local 2030 Coalition, which is a United Nations system-wide platform for SDG localization that is seeking to bridge the gap between global agendas and local realities, right? So allow me to focus my short intervention on the link between localization of sustainable development and precisely peace, right? So as an international statement, and as Ambassador Kim has mentioned at the beginning, peace and security are prerequisites for achieving sustainable development. It's essential, right? But sustainable development also provides a pathway to peaceful societies, right? So taking that into account, the 2030 agenda focus on peace is not a coincidence, and it comes at a critical time for global and regional security. There's a range of new transnational and global threats, right, that are addressed in the 2030 agenda, and are furthering aggravating the security challenges that we face now. So my first issue is why is the 2030 agenda relevant in terms of peace, right? First, I think it's clearly intended to reduce poverty and inequality that lies behind the whole problem, right? And these two are major drivers of conflict and instability, are the major drivers of conflict and instability. So addressing the roots causes of intolerance, discrimination, and promoting inclusive societies, tolerant and diverse and integrated approaches is essential, and it's at the core of the 2030 agenda. The agenda also creates a two-way relationship between the environment and peace, two very essential elements, right? Why? Because it speaks about environmental challenges as potential sources of conflict, which is exactly what they are. And we've got lots of examples here in the Mediterranean, in Africa, in many other parts of the world, right? The agenda also defends how the good economic governance, the rule of law, equitable economic development are the prerequisites for peaceful and prosperous communities, right? And also the agenda promotes economic development that is socially and environmentally sustainable, helping as a help to address the root causes of conflict and to create, and as essential to create more stable and peaceful societies. So at this point, I think it's important to consider ways which sustainable development can be used as a tool to promote peace and stability around the world, right? We say like a million times in the last, I've been the last week in New York, if not a million, a billion times I've heard we are the Ecuador of the agenda. We have to speed up the process. Only 15% of the SDGs will be committed if we continue like that, right? Let me be a little bit critical on this. We need revolutionary movements. We don't need people to say that we are on the to keep on saying what everyone knows from the local or the national or the international perspective, which is we are not reaching the point, right? So which are those revolutionary movements? Which are the proposals, right? On my view, one of them is localization. We have to make, we may have to switch from just advocating for the global agenda. And maybe we should stop explaining about SDGs and what the SDGs are and everything. And we should start working locally on concrete actions. Why locally? Because 70% of the public competences to achieve the SDGs are at the local level. And peaceful and inclusive societies are constructed at a local level. They're not constructed in New York or in Madrid or in any other part of the world, right? So why speaking about localization and peace in the same phrase and all together, right? First, I think localization is essential because building sustainable and peaceful societies, which is part of the same thing, requires more than just the involvement in international organizations and governments, right? It requires to scale it down to include the voices and the decision-making level that is closer to the people. So the localization of the SDGs allows us an authentic and indispensable multi-level and multi-stakeholder, not just vertical but horizontal approach and action, right? Particularly with vulnerable or vulnerated individuals and groups, right? And no need to give examples about this, right? But those who have been left behind, right? And by the way, a situation that very often fuels conflict and threatens peace, right? So at this particular point, the role of universities and their leaders is critical, right? The universities, as Professor Simons mentioned before, I think I'm going to quote him, right? It says it's shaping global citizens and connecting people to people and not just governments to governments, right? Apart from obviously the impact on future generations that we have on a daily basis. So the active participation of local communities, as I said before, is critical. But why? Because communities have a unique understanding of their own needs, and very often national and international levels don't. It's too wide. It's too generalized. We need a list. Let me be critical again. We need to make a list we all agree with. That implies going too general, going too on the how is that in mathematics, right? The minimum common denominator, right? And when localizing, we go into the specific needs attached to a sense of inclusiveness. People feel included in the discussion and part of the solution, right? When communities are in power, they take ownership of their own future, right? And they're more likely to be part of a successful and long-term implementation of SDGs, right? Apart from secondary effects such as accountability, etc., right? So when communities are working together in these common goals, are more likely to resolve their conflicts through dialogue and negotiation rather than violence, right? So we have got examples of maras in Central America, in many of the Central American contexts, right? And also another additional gain by localizing is that sustainability and peace is that we can share with other territories at a local level, local to local, territory to territory, experience to experience, right? And that again, inter-university cooperation, essential. Exchanges, staff, students, scholars, research, joint projects, right? Is again a huge opportunity, right? So the commitments at the national level summarized are strategic and they are needed. Family of the future, right? But we need to incorporate also tactical level. We need to work on a specific concrete actions, right? Because going local pushes people's implication. People know what they are. They know which are their challenges, what do they need. And if you give them the chance to be there, they can and want to be part of the solution, right? I don't want to spend too much, but a couple more points, right? For me, localization, it's about reaching people's values too, people's culture, people's DNA as social beings, right? And it's an antidote against political disaffection of large parts of the population. I don't know in your countries, but here in Spain, it's we have clear examples of people disconnecting, or even worse, feeling a strong disaffection towards politics and a strong disaffection towards democracy, as democracy has failed to deliver solutions that, for example, growth, a system of model of growth that can grow vertically but also horizontally. There's a disillusionment with politics, and even worse, mistrust towards the public policies. And as an antidote, localizing sustainability and peaceful agendas, it's also acting preventively as a preventive treatment to avoid deterioration of democracy. It's essential that we do that if we're going to be constructing peaceful societies. So let me close by summarizing or highlighting, if we want, some specific elements that need to be strengthened for localization process that contributes to peace, right? First, has to have a human rights approach. Localization is not just about SDGs, it's about SDGs with human rights perspective. Because it's the basis of the social contract, if we're going to build a new social contract, right? Second, if we understand peace not only as the absence of conflict, but as a construction or a social contract that responds to expectations of citizens, localization has a great advantage. It can generate active, conscious, and protagonist citizens. We engage the people, right? So we stop this top-down approach about I'm telling you what you need, I'm telling you what's best for you, I'm telling you the decolonization we've mentioned before, right? Of Western politicians and donors and financiers telling Southern people what they should be doing, or global South people, right? again, localization also means generating effective, transparent, democratic institutions that respond to demands that are effective in providing citizens their own capabilities to develop the free and peaceful exercise of the rights. That is essential if we're going to be building peaceful societies, right? It's the concept of UNDP, Amartya Sen, right? Nothing new. Unfortunately, nothing fully implemented, but nothing new. And finally, if we contribute from the local level to this rights-based, human rights-based approach, and this governance based on peace, I think we could be providing a solution to one of the key issues of the delay in the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Agenda, which is financing. By building peace locally, we would be able to attract long-term private and public investment much more efficiently and effectively. Because reducing the convulsions and volatilities of non-peaceful societies will allow us to connect with the will of financial actors to expand the economic cycle in the long term through sustainable development. Right? So I don't want to use too much of the time, and I know, Ramu, that we are a bit of the schedule, right? So thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it to share these thoughts with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Inigo, and that was really perceptive. The point about localization being an antidote, as you put it, to disaffection and also disconnection. And I'd like to take that metaphor to the university landscape as well. And our valedictory speaker, Dr. Elizabeth Strobel, the Chancellor of Webster University and a member of the Executive Committee of the IUP, is really leading an institution which is emblematic of that. It's localized in the sense of being in a university in a small area called Webster Groves, but through international presence and partnerships with universities in Africa, in Greece, and Uzbekistan, has become truly a global university, just as you, Inigo, use that metaphor for localization of the SDGs as a means to their universality. So, Dr. Strobel, may I invite you to be our valedictory speaker?
Well, thank you very much. Given our timing, I want to do two things. I want to reflect a little bit on the powerful learning experience that we've all experienced today. My professional background is as an educator, first educating high school level students, then university level students, and currently in my role as the chancellor of what is truly a global university, as Ramu said, founded in 1915 here in St. Louis, Missouri, in a very charming suburb of St. Louis called Webster Groves. We share a name, but we actually have residential campuses in Europe, Asia, Central Asia, and Africa. And those students are Webster students wherever their home is, and it is part of what brought me to this university. As each of us came today to this learning experience and the opportunity to speak and hear from colleagues, we bring our own personal history, our professional history, and the places where we make our homes. And each speaker today has reflected eloquently on that reality. What do we know about ourselves? What do we know about the world? And how do we enlarge that through the free flow of people, information, and ideas? And how do we, Ambassador Kim, as you've inspired us, how are we personally and professionally, and particularly in the role of university presidents, embodiments of peace, instruments, agents of peace in the communities that we inhabit and that we are part of? How does that translate to action? And how do we not just talk about it, but indeed take actions that assure that what the SDGs capture as elements and components of a peaceful future are being furthered by ourselves and side by side with our university colleagues, and particularly through our students. It is our role as university presidents or chancellors to equip our students to be global citizens. And it has been true for Webster truly since our founding. We were founded in 1915 by an order of Catholic sisters. They created this university because at that point in this part of the United States, women could not get bachelor's degrees. And so because that was true for them, they decided to found a university and make it specifically serving the needs of women to get bachelor's degrees. As early as 1919, 4 years after their founding, they welcomed the first 2 international students from France who were funded by intergovernmental sources. They had been French students, and of course, this is right after World War I, and they were brought to Webster to have the opportunity for an education. It's been true of this university for a very, very long time. But I think about what's required now and how it is that in the post-pandemic years, we bring back more fully and more equitably and from a grassroots way, the kinds of experiences, engagement, knowledge, and skills for students that give them the opportunity to understand themselves better and to understand others. We've heard today the challenge to live creatively, to think creatively about these solutions. And I particularly, Ramu, love that expression about academic humility and intellectual curiosity. It's what we're all called to do. It's why we are part of this panel today, not to present as much as to listen, to engage with the ideas that each person on this panel has presented us today. We should leave this panel different individuals than who we came. We should have new ideas, new challenges, new ways to think about our agency as leaders and as colleagues in our local communities, as well as global communities. And so I think the recommitment to making sure that our students know others' experiences, others' lived experiences through direct contact is a principle that's fundamental to the International Association of University Presidents. And it's why I'm so pleased to be a member of that organization and that Fernando asked me to reflect on today's conversation. As the Chancellor of Webster University, I seek partners in thought, in leadership, in action, and look forward to continuing what we've heard in today's panel as an impetus to making this year of reflection a one that tells us a year from now, the world will be a more peaceful place because of us. So thank you very much for this opportunity today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. Thank you for that and for your words. Both you mentioned that everyone who comes into this conversation should leave the conversation changed in some way. So I'm going to take the liberty of giving the last word to Ambassador Kim, who I see is still with us despite the lateness of the hour in Korea. And Ambassador Kim is the only speaker who has not had the benefit of hearing speakers before him, before he spoke. But I wonder, sir, if you could just give us a couple of concluding thoughts before we wind up. Are you on mic? Is your mic on, sir? Yeah. So.
Thank you, Ramu. And although, as you said, I had a really long day because of the time difference. Our International Day of Peace meeting started early in the morning, Korea time. So now it is almost 13 hours. And in fact, many speakers joined us from abroad. Professor Nick Bostrom from Oxford University and Professor John Eikenberry from Princeton, despite the lateness of ours. And now I'm returning the favor to you. And even Liberato Batista, you may know, the president of the Congo Conference of NGOs attached to United Nations. He joined us in the afternoon session. we had, which was 2 a.m. New York time. And he sat through the meeting until 4 a.m. So it was far better for me. So much more humane for me. But still, I'm very excited to hear all the comments members of the IAUP made on the importance of education at local, national, regional, and global level. And how can we make these networks work toward addressing the gaps we have in education? And we are worried about the widening education gap because of the COVID period. Digital divide already existing in many parts of the world, particularly in Africa, South Asia. That worsened education gap we had in the third world. So maybe for many young generation, those 3 lost years may be very hard to catch up in the later school years. So how can you help them to catch up with education divide worsened by the digital divide and the pandemic? I think is a huge task before us. And of course, at higher education at the university level, we also discussed in Kyunghee session earlier today, and many agree that higher education is the crown jewel of our intellectual capacity building, to think differently and act differently as a global citizen, but also as a, now we have a new term, planetary citizen, with the whole universe in perspective. Because now we have to be humble before the vastness of the universe and the long history of not only the planet Earth, but the whole universe. Because human civilization, we discussed today, is maybe 10,000 years old. But compared to maybe 140 billion years, 140 billion years, or 4.5 billion years of Earth, then it is a very small fraction of history. But humanity, we are living as if we have dominated the whole universe and the planet Earth. So we have to reflect about ourselves first to change the civilizational paradigm. And that we should start with education. Reflection on ourselves and making us humbler before the much longer history and much larger destinies of the universe. And that education we start from the university, and also we all agreed on the need to get out of the silos, even at the universities. So thinking out of the box, thinking out of the silos, breaking the silos, and encouraging truly interdisciplinary education so that we can learn how to think, combining humanities, natural and social sciences, even at the undergraduate level. It's a huge challenge because even at Kyunghee University, professors don't like it. So we have to find a way how we can break the silos at the universities, and how can we encourage our next generations to learn think, act differently from establishment generations. It's not easy. And catchword we heard from today's discussion was we should not think we work for the youth, but we should also think we work with the youth. For the youth, but with the world, with the youth. It means we have to understand their mindset so that we can teach them better, thinking in their shoes and making them prepared for the future to come. And that should be the starting point. And all of us agree today at Kyunghee was we have to build the planetary citizenship education. And we have to prepare ourselves to teach them rather than trying to inject our thinking onto them, but working with them so that they can shape their future better for them, for the future they can build in a way they want. So thank you so much. I learned a lot, and I'm truly inspired by all the wisdom you share with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador. And thank you for that very important subtlety of the preposition that it's not just doing things for people, whichever people, but doing things with people. And I think that's true of students, as you said, and of course, the great initiative that IUP is now launched under President Garcia and with Chancellor Strobel of doing things for women in leadership positions at universities, but doing it with women as well. On that note, my gratitude to all of you. I see both Laverne and Inigo are with us, and I imagine that others, thank you so much, Dr. Carvalho, you're here as well. And I imagine others may have just muted their cameras for the moment. I apologize that we have gone beyond what we thought was our schedule, but maybe I shouldn't really apologize because I think it's been such a rich discussion that the extra 10 or 12 minutes that we've spent have been a very good investment of our time, of our morning, and our future conversations to which all of us look forward. My particular gratitude to Carlotta, Raul, and of course, Noe of the CETUS team who have put this together. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day and a glorious International Day of Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.